На завершення нашої програми пропонуємо переглянути відеофільм, присвячений Олені Блаватській, який створив наш колега з Дніпра Ігор Комаров. Зараз ми покажемо англійську версію і просимо автора показати себе і сказати нам декілька слів.
And now at the end of our program, we offer you to watch video film dedicated to Helena Blavatsky. The film was created by our colleague from the city of Dnipro, Igor Komarov. There are Ukrainian and English versions of this film, and we are going to show and to watch the English one. We ask the author to introduce himself and tell us a few words about the film. So, Mr. Igor, you are welcome.
Дуже дякую. Мене чутно?
Да, чутно дуже добре.
Дякую. По-перше, вітаю всіх з Днем Вісника Світла. Передусім, буквально у двох словах хочу поінформувати про оновлення на нашому YouTube-каналі. Буквально вчора я там розмістив четверту частину семінару Джой Мілс і Роберта Елвуда на тему «7 президентів, 7 ер. Обличчя теософії, що змінюється». Ця частина присвячена президентству Джина Раджадаси, так що у кого є інтерес до історії, передусім до історії теософічного товариства, прошу до перегляду. I'm glad to see all of us on this valuable day. First of all, I'd like to apologize for my English. I'm not an author, more a compiler and a maker. I made this video in Russian language in 2016, and since then I wanted to make it in English. So I made visual content and translated text into English, excuse me. But my Russian text in greater majority was already the translation from English. As a result, I got a double translation and a very confusing and misleading text. I had to ask Mr. Kurt Leland to check and fix it, and he did an incredible job. He found the original quotations and replaced them. In the end, he edited the text into the style in which he had received it from me. I'm very, very grateful to Bro Kurt for that. Тепер, що стосується фільму, який ми дивитимемося далі. Це не нове кіно про Блаватську. Цей фільм був зроблений у 2016 році російською мовою. Вже тоді я мав на увазі зробити англійську його версію, я підготував слайди і переклав текст на англійську, але моя англійська була дуже низької якості і, чесно кажучи, з того часу кращою не стала. Тому я звернувся до носіїв мови, і на мій запит відповів американський теософіст, національний лектор Курт Ліланд. Його лекції по чакрам, кундаліні і вищим світам ви без особливих труднощів знайдете на нашому каналі в плейлисті лекції, семінари, зустрічі. Тільки уявіть, яку фантастичну роботу зробила ця світла людина. Мій текст російською був складений на базі перекладів з англійської, який я трішечки причепурив, так би мовити, для того звучання, яке я закладав цей посил. Потім я переклав все це неабияк складно на англійську, в сенсі зовсім не складно. Тобто зробив реверсивний переклад, і все це було проаналізовано Куртом. Знайдено оригіналу, яких було немало, повірте мені. Все це прискіпливо змінено і знов-таки причепурено вже їм, але англійською. Неймовірний підхід, неймовірна праця, велика дяка цій світлій людині, завдяки зусиллям якої з'явився цей фільм, але вже англійською. І оскільки англійська версія тривалістю на 3 хвилини довше, то це дало змогу зробити відео ще й українською. нашою рідною мовою, яка не накладалася на російський візуальний контент, передусім із-за малої його тривалості. On the occasion, I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to the American, Australian, New Zealand, Indian, and other sections, as well as to all active theosophists throughout the world. And now a few words about the dedication. This film was dedicated to, quote, the White Lotus Day, with heartful gratitude to all generations of theosophists for their tireless and selfless service to humanity. So, you are welcome to watch it. Thank you. Завершуючи свою вступну промову...
Мне включить, Игорь. А мне включили ты или ты сам включишь?
Якщо б мені б сказали, що я повинен транслювати, то я би...
Ні, нема питань. Якщо...
Так, у мене вони є, але я повинен відкрити. І ще буквально секунду, я останнє, то що англійською, скажу українською. Завершуючи свою вступну промову, я хочу підкреслити те, кому саме присвячений цей фільм. Якщо російська версія присвячувалась лише великому подвижнику Олені Блаватській, то англійська і українська мають трошки інший акцент присвячення, а саме, цитую, «До Дня Білого Лотосу з безмежним почуттям вдячності до всіх поколінь теософістів за жертовність і самозабуття в їх плідній праці служіння людству». Це все, що я хотів сказати, тож запрошую до перегляду. Всім велике дякую.
In 1892, a leading New York newspaper, The Sun, published an article that stated, "A woman who for one reason or another has kept the word, first her little child word and afterward to hemispheres, talking of her, disputing about her, defending or assailing her character and motives, joining her enterprise or opposing it might and main, and in her death being as much telegraphed about between two continents as an emperor, must have been a remarkable person." These words were written about Madame Helena Blavatsky. On 8 May 1891, at the age of 59 years, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky quietly died in her office behind her desk. This Russian woman of genius laid the foundations of the worldwide theosophical movement. It would be hard to express in a few words the whole character of this great Eugenie. She was more than an occultist, more than a world traveler, more than a brilliant conversationalist and writer who was well versed in the traditions and philosophies existing throughout the world. She was a uniquely balanced personality combining the abilities of a fine musician, an inquisitor historian, a fiery publicist, a brave traveler, an artist, a philosopher and a theologian. Even now she is a prime example of dedication, honesty, loyalty and kindness, a person of encyclopedic knowledge engaged in a constant flurry of activity regardless of her age or state of health. Without exception, those who knew and wrote about her said that she had an extraordinary spiritual force that dominated her surroundings. Her trustfulness and sincerity reached a pitch that was inconceivable for a soul that had brought together such an unprecedented variety of life experiences, from being the apprentice of Eastern sages to becoming an extraordinary master and prophet of the ancient wisdom, which attempted to unite all ancient Aryan beliefs into a common occultism and prove that all religions originated from a single divine source. One of her biographers wrote that living alongside HPB, as Madame Blavatsky was warmly called by people who knew her personally, was to be constantly surrounded by wonders. Another biographer called her charming and said that she captivated everyone with whom she came into close contact. Through the power of her all-pervading bottomless gaze, she could perform the most incomprehensible miracles. Flowers blossomed before your eyes, and when she called for distant objects, they came flying into her hands. If we take a closer look at the life of this extraordinary woman, it becomes obvious that preparation for her occult work began in childhood. Even as a child, she was endowed with psychic powers which became stronger as a result of training in later life. She could transcend the barriers of time and see the past and future through the prism of any surrounding form of life. For her, all nature seemed to be alive with the same mysterious forces that existed within herself. She heard the voices of every object and form, organic and inorganic. Not only did she claim consciousness and existence for mystical forces that were visible and audible only to herself, where others saw only emptiness, but also she claimed it for visible and inanimate things such as pebbles, grey mounds, and decayed pieces of phosphorescent wood. Her eyes also easily accessed the more extensive spheres of inner worlds. Her journeys around the world were highly unusual, especially because she traveled without concern for her own safety, even though she was a young woman traveling alone. After leaving Russia as a teenager, Blavatsky spent 10 years exploring strange and remote regions of Central Asia, India, South America, Africa, and Eastern Europe. So her extraordinary travels could be seen as the aimless movements of a restless person in search of adventure. With deeper consideration, they could also be seen as the constant movements toward a goal of her own. During such trips, she explored the doctrines of the various countries and civilizations through which she passed. She collected knowledge of the traditions of ancient people whose descendants now live in lands that were once part of lost Atlantis. Since her early childhood, Madame Blavatsky had always been under the protection of her master. Even as a child, she had often clairvoyantly seen the same tall and mysterious figure of an Indian man wearing a white turban. In 1851, it so happened that she actually met this Mahatma in London, immediately recognizing him as a guardian angel who had guided and taken care of her for all her life. Helena Petrovna was capable of incredible amounts of work and extraordinary patience, especially when it came to serving her ideals. Her dedication to her masters was heroic, fiery, strong, overcoming all obstacles, loyal to the last breath. For her, nothing mattered but her duty to her masters and to theosophy. She said that every last drop of her blood was for them, and they will be given the last beat of my heart. It is incredible that during such a short life she could give to the world so much occult wisdom through her writing work. Describing the period when Madame Blavatsky was working on Isis Unveiled, Colonel Olcott explained that it was a rare and unforgettable experience to watch her work. He usually sat opposite her at a large table and he could see her every movement. Her pen would fly over the page and suddenly she would freeze, staring into space with the distracted eyes of the clairvoyant, as if something invisible hung in the air in front of her. She would begin copying onto paper all that she saw. When she was finished, her eyes would return to normal, and she would continue to write as usual until she was once again stopped in that way. The Secret Doctrine, her magnum opus, was published in 1888. Blavatsky described this work as a synthesis of science, philosophy, and religion. Even a century later, this extraordinary work, with its immensity of knowledge and the enormous spectrum of teachings covered in it, never ceases to amaze students and researchers. A corner of the veil that hid the secret wisdom was raised with the publication of this monumental work. However, the aim of the Secret Doctrine was not so much to teach secrets as to lead truth seekers to an eternal truth, a doctrine that underlies all teaching and cannot be expressed in words because it's above all languages. Her monumental work returned to the world a holistic vision of life that was lost, in which science, philosophy, and religion were not separate entities but parts of a whole. She provided a breathtaking view of the cosmos and its evolution, from one-celled organism to star systems, all subject to the same laws and rising to ever higher levels of expression and perfection by means of cyclic processes. In the Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky compared the lotus or Padma, as it's called in Sanskrit, with the cosmos and with human beings. It is significant that Colonel Olcott, co-founder and first president of the Theosophical Society, decided to call Blavatsky's Memorial Day White Lotus Day. The mysteries of HPB's life were similar to the lotus, originated in the depths of materiality, with its stem cutting the thick of water the spatial dimensions to become a beautifully blossoming flower in the rays of the spiritual sun. The lotus is a symbol of divine birth, spiritual purity, and perfection. No one could speak better about Madame Blavatsky than her like-minded people who knew her personally, as well as her grateful followers of various generations of Theosophists. Christmas Humphreys had this to say about her: "What a woman, misunderstood, vilified and abused, and yet with a brilliant, cultured and deeply learned mind. The very soul of generosity, a woman of direct speech and action, refusing to talk the pious platitudes and nonsense that we chatter under the guise of socially good manners, but offering the truth for anyone who wanted it. She was never neutral or the same to all. She made a great number of friends who would die for her, and enemies who would kill her if they could. Those strong blue eyes could see in the character of every man and woman who came to her, and even see whom she would later be betrayed. She would help from her meager funds, and she was always poor, all those in need, even though she knew at the time that they were planning to smother the cause she had given her life to serve. As a speaker she was magnetic. She never lectured, but she would talk, and those who heard her could think of nothing else. After meeting her, nothing was quite the same again." Edmund Russell recollected that she was utterly indifferent to gossip, which she never bothered to deny. She once said to me, "Mud has rained down so long, I do not attempt even to open an umbrella." Furthermore, she lived in great truth, yet was called a liar, in great generosity, yet was called a fraud, in detestation of all charms, and yet was crowned the queen of humbugs. She was a bar of iron heated red hot, which becomes as fire, forgetting its own nature. She seemed not to have needs or pleasures of her own. According to William Kinsland, she did something more than teach us a new system of philosophy. She drew together the threads of our life, those threads which run back in the past and forward into the future, but which we had been unable to trace, and showed us the pattern we had been viewing and the purpose of our work. She taught us theosophy, not as a mere form of doctrine, not as a religion or a philosophy or a creed or a working hypothesis, but as a living power in our lives. She taught these doctrines in order that men might dissociate themselves from all forms of doctrine and reach the higher self. There is no older doctrine than this of divine compassion, of universal brotherhood. It is above all doctrine, all creeds, all formulas. It is the essence of all religions. Charles Johnston had this to say about Blavatsky. With unparalleled force, she asserted the soul. With transcendent strength, she taught the reality of the spirit by living the life and manifesting the energies of an immortal. She had the courage to live as an immortal spirit and to subject material nature and the base forces of life to the powers of her immortality. And this dominant power and this clear interior light were united to a nature of wonderful kindness, wonderful gentleness, and absolute self-forgetfulness and forgiveness of wrong. Madame Blavatsky's nature was like a mountain torrent having its source in some deep, clear lake above the clouds and impetuously carrying down to the valleys the reach of the mountains to spread them over the hungry and thirsty plains below. Bertram Kittler remembered her thus. HPB pointed out to us the yet dim star shining down the pathway of time. She taught those who would listen to seek within themselves its ray, and pointed out the road to be traveled, indicated its signposts and dangers, made us realize that he who perseveres endures in self-forgetting efforts to help humanity holds in his hands the clue to life's tangled mazes. For his heart and mind alike grow filled with the wisdom that is born of love and knowledge, purified from all taint of self. Every hour of every day she showed those whom she loved how to rise to the level of her own lofty standard of duty and devotion to the truth. Indeed, one marked characteristic of her life, both as a whole and in detail, was a marvelous singleness of heart and purpose. She was above all else the servant man. None came to her with a sincere, honest appeal for help and failed to get it. When she died, she left us the charge to keep the link unbroken, to hand unto others the help she gave so freely to ourselves. In his reminiscence of Blavatsky, Herbert Burroughs wrote, "The real key for us is to be found in the example of her self-sacrificing devotion of her work. Thus, we learn from her life that our goal is not personal benefit, but offering service to the world and serving without complaint until the very end." Speaking about herself, Madame Blavatsky said, "Each one of us is a piece of charcoal, more or less black, but there is hardly any piece so vile and dirty that it has no atoms wherein lie in germ of future diamond. And I keep my eyes fixed on these atoms, and do not see the rest, and do not want to see. As I work for others, and not for myself, I permit myself to use these atoms for the common cause." According to Colonel Olcott, HPB's enthusiasm was a quenchless flame at which all our theosophists lit their torches. In memory, the followers of theosophy, the ageless wisdom brought in the world once again by a great ascetic, cherish the bright image of the white lotus of modern times, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky.